So I'm going to start off this video by stating that I didn't realize all I had to do was click a button to make this full screen. So yeah, embarrassing. Another thing, I feel really good today. So if you see me being very rambunctious, that's why. Now, I took some notes because I know I have a tendency to be really passionate when I want to talk about something, and then I forget like the key pointers of what I wanted to talk about. But basically, I watched this video earlier, not even fully halfway because this just came out of the blue, but I watched it and it was basically this video by this YouTuber I like who was talking about my generation's loneliness. And I'm Generation Z, so I thought about it and I was listening to some of her perspectives. And on one hand, I could empathize, I could understand, I could try to reason with it. But then it had me wondering, and I'm like, I have a different point of view. So that's what I wanted to talk about. For starters, with the loneliness thing, I know that with my generation, we get a lot of labels about how we're the most laziest generation, the most emotional, and we have the most loneliness epidemics. And I wanted to start off and preface by saying, if I said that right, anyway, I wanted to start off by saying that, of course, there's two sides to every story, and two things can be true at once. We definitely have those problems, but to offer a different perspective, I would say that maybe that's the point. And I know that might be like a little weird for some people to accept or even acknowledge or think that that's okay. But hear me out, right? What if, for Gen Z specifically, we're supposed to be the generation that is messy, that is feelers, that expresses, that is talkers, that is out and about and out there, but on social media? What if that's the point of our generation? What if our generation is supposed to be one of the generations to teach future generations about social media use? What if we're like the first real generation to be so embedded in social media because that's the point of our generation? What if we're supposed to be the generation that, though messy, though unserious in nature, or though we might have a lot of different influences because we have so much access to damn near everybody on the planet, what if we are the generation that's supposed to help future generations know what to do, what not to do? And I made this quote earlier and like I got really giddy about it or whatever, but what if we're supposed to be the generation that teaches future generations or even just the generations that exist right now, right? What's real, what's not real, when to be real, how to be real, in the real, not on a real. I'm gonna let that sink in. I'm gonna let that sink in. But for the people in the bag, um, what's real, what's not real, when and how to get real, in the real, not on a reel. Just a quote I made up. It could be trash. It could be. I could be spitting nothing, right? But that quote, in the midst of me talking to myself, made me realize, like, wait, we are the generation that will be able to teach other generations that, hey, you can be online and be real, but also recognize that not everything should be on a reel. Insta, come on now. Just by us simply being our generation, by always being online, by being chronically online or doom scrolling and all our different lingo that we use to basically describe who we are, how we are, right? As a generation. So that was one thing that I thought about, and I'm not gonna lie, it made me like so happy, and I wanted to share this with other Gen Zers out there, but also just people in general. And even if it's just one person, that's the goal. Because I know that people that are like me, that grew up in this time period where, though, as I've mentioned before, there are, some positive things that come with our generation. There are definitely some things that will shape us in ways that we wish hadn't, but will be a good example for the generations prior to us and the generations after us. I know with loneliness, it can be one of those things that, at least as I've seen, previous generations either didn't have the space to talk about or didn't want to talk about for whatever reason or felt scared to. And with my generation, we have the ability to speak up from a distance, which can provide a sense of safety, even if it might feel false or might feel fake or whatever word you want to use to basically say that it might not be or it isn't real, right? However, I would offer a different perspective that maybe the fact that we have this, the fact that we can talk to our devices but know that we're also talking to other people is, first of all, brilliant. Like, we came from caveman days hitting rocks on trees and we could do this. So that's sick in itself. But the fact that we can talk to each other, and not just talk to each other, we can be ourselves with ourselves and then show that online, is a gift. Because there's so many generations prior to us that didn't have access to that, and not just in the sense of like technology. They didn't have the means to talk face to face to each other about alternative perspectives or opinions without being hurt or betrayed or belittled or pushed away. All these different things, right? And that's not to say that they didn't have their moments where they were able to come together and be what they needed to be during their time period. And I think that's also another thing. I think it's great that each generation has like that one thing that is like, it solidifies the generation. It's the one thing that ties them together. And for my generation, I don't want us to forget that. Like, I know that we might look back at other generations and think, oh, well, that's the best it's going to get. The generation with MLK and Michael Jackson, and the generation in the 1600s and before AC and BC and all these different time periods. That's the best it's going to get, as far as like they have a certain level of, I don't really want to use the word status, but I'm gonna use that just for a lack of a better word, where it's like they're one of the greats. How can we be that when we don't even have normal teenage years? Or I was a teenager in the pandemic and I didn't get to experience certain things my mom experienced, or the generation where my grandma got to experience, and so forth and so forth, right? And of course, those are valid concerns, valid feelings and emotions, and I think it's great that my generation, we have the ability to be aware of so much of that thanks to social media. And to kind of put a pin on what I was saying before and like sidetrack a bit, I was thinking about how did I lose my train of thought, bro? I lost my train of thought. So let's go back to my notes because I already forgot. Uh oh, one thing that I wanted to talk about was the importance of generational unity, appreciation, and recognition. I know that we admire generations prior to us and we also critique them. And I think that's a good thing. It's a human thing. We need to. That's how we evolve, right? And one thing that has given me a sense of ease is thinking how cool it is that we get to be a new generation and we get to affect humanity in a new way. Like, of course, there are always going to be the good and the bad in evolution, but inherently, that's beautiful. It's not a bad thing. It's not something that I think we should demonize for any generation. Like, yes, each generation has something about them that we're just like, y'all, we evolved past that. Why they still tripping? But, but, I think it's important for us to recognize that the things that we dislike about previous generations is also a sign of evolution and is a good thing, but also not judge them so harshly because no generation is better than the next in the sense of like we're all human at the end of the day. At the end of the day, like if all the generations were line up in like on the planet, let's say on the globe, if we were all here, which first of all, I think the earth would give out if we all existed on this planet. Probably why we're mortal. But if we were all here, we'd still be on the same playing field, regardless of our generational background. We'd still be on the same playing field. So, to me, it's kind of like, y'all do realize we all humans, right? Why we bashing each other when we should be focused on our generations, be an example, try our best to be authentic, take care of ourselves, you know, and love each other in the best way we can. And then when we pass on, hope that the generations that are either existing or will exist after us will be able to learn from us. And if not, be inspired. Or simply just admire how we were. Like to me, I was thinking about this idea I had where let's say there's this perfect generation, right? Where they are able to manage every part of the human experience in a way that collectively benefits everyone. And even if there's a mishap or they recognize something needs to change, they have a matter or a way they go about things that manages it well, make sure that there isn't a massive catastrophe or wars or whatever, right? I think it's so beautiful to think that one day, maybe, there could be like this hallway, right? Kind of similar to the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where Miles is walking past some of the spider people. I forgot what it was called. And they're in like these tubes and you just see them. Imagine that. Imagine that visual, right? But, oh, I guess I should have said spoiler warning. Whoops. But imagine that, right? And since they're going to be like the perfect generation, they're going to have so much technology. I already know it. It's going to be beyond what we can even comprehend currently. What if it's like a hologram, and let's say it's like diamond shaped, and then you can swipe, and then you get this beautiful image, beautiful visual, or monologue, let's say, of that generation. Like, I think that is so beautiful to think that one day we will be able to generate a generation that will be able to create that technology to pay respect to the generation I'm in, and the generation I'm in, and the generations before me, and the generations that come after me prior to them. I think that'd be so cool if you could see like this huge museum and you see every generation that's ever existed in humanity, and you're just walking down and you just swipe and you see every generation and whatever they deem is the most significant parts of each generation. And honestly, for Gen Z, all I'm gonna say is, and maybe it's the Gen Z in me, right? Maybe we might be one of them generations they high key might like. Not because we perfect, but because we messy as hell. That's not what I said, and I ain't taking it back. What if our generation is one that they really admire because we're willing to break social norms? What if we're the generation where they're like, hold up, okay, I'm not gonna lie, they had a lot of issues. They was addicted to TikTok and all these other things. However, in the midst of all of the chaos going on in the world that they saw on a screen, on a little device, or a TV if you have one, whatever floats your boat, and they managed to find self-awareness, to find community through a screen in the midst of COVID, in the midst of just normal human problems, humane problems. They ate that up, or whatever word they'll use to basically say that we did what we did, and we came here and we conquered. I'm just saying. So yeah, I think that with Generation Z, and honestly this is a message to like all generations in general, own it. If we're supposed to be the generation of loneliness, of laziness, of all these different words, own it. Flip it on its head. Own it. Accept it. Yeah, I'm lonely, and at least I'm aware of it. At least I'm aware of it to the point that I can actually fix it, or at least seek help, ask for help. And that's no shade to any generations, regardless of which one you're in, whether it's Gen Z or not, that do or don't ask for help. The fact that we have access to so much technology and so much knowledge, mind you, whether it's fake or not, is a good thing. Because also, we'll be the generation that will be an example and be able to teach the next generations, like I said before in my quote, what's real and what's not real. We'll be able to, at least I would say, that one of the things that we're going to have to overcome as a generation that's going to be like our thing is discernment within social media. We're going to need that. We're going to need to be able to be discerned and to know not just what's real and what's not real, but to also recognize and have empathy alongside the discernment for humanity online and in general and in person. I think that's one of the key things that my generation is going to show humanity as a whole. We're going to show you that, hey, social media can be very damaging if not careful. It can be very messy if not careful. It can hold a lot of data that you may or may not want out there. But you can also overcome it. You can also embrace it. And neither is better than the other. It's human. So, let's see what else I have on here. All right. Briefly, I want to talk about mortality. I know it's one of those things where we can get really uncomfortable about it because nobody wants to die, but maybe it's the Scorpio in me, and I mean Scorpio moon to be exact, that doesn't really mind talking about the darker aspects of life. I know that we can be really driven by our mortality, and that can feed us into things like substance or addiction, or simply just seeking out connections that aren't good for us, or just connections in general, but not being able to sustain those connections or recognize when they're good or not, is because we fear death. We fear a lot of different things, not just death, but in general. And I'd like to offer up a perspective that maybe you could look at death in the way I do. Yeah, it's scary. It's painful. It's not something you want to go through. And you hope that we'll be the generation to finding immortality and, find the way to sustain our physical bodies for as long as humanly possible and beyond humanly. But maybe when we pass on, we get to spectate, like in games. Maybe it's like whether you want to call it angels or spirit guides or whatever word you want to use to describe it. What if our souls move on from this realm and we're able to spectate and help everybody that's currently existing, and we get to have soulful powers or something? I think that'd be cool. I think it'd be cool to be able to help on the other side. And honestly, I'd like to believe and say, and I trust that there is another side to all of this that we don't really understand, but we definitely get signs of. And though it's scary to not only witness it, death, and scary to think that one day you will also experience your own, I think that for our generation specifically, right? Talking to the Gen Zers, everybody else, y'all. Nah, I'm kidding. I think that with us, since we are the lonely epidemic generation, right? Or at least that's the narrative that's going around. What if we come together in kumbaya, right? Hold each other's hands and say, hey, we mortal, we scared, we don't want to die, but we here together. We are all tied together by this generation. Let's live it together. Let's collectively as a generation work towards our generational purpose. Yeah, let's work together to work to our generational purpose. And maybe then we'd feel less alone. If we're the generation that's chronically online, let's own it. But let's do it together. Let's be there for one another. Let's make sure that nobody feels alone just because all they have is this device, right? Be authentic. Embrace your mortality. And appreciate your access to social media. And also, another thing that I really like about social media, if I was to like advocate for it, of course, there's like, good and bad and everything, but if I was to advocate for social media, I'd say it's social media's influence and all the beautiful people on here that are different and similar to me and have their own unique experiences and their individualism that made me who I am. I wouldn't be this version of me. I wouldn't be able to be self-aware enough to know that, hey, I'm a little awkward, I'm a little uncomfortable with talking to the screen, it ain't really my thing, I don't really like being seen. However, it's just a screen. And I can still be me. Even if I might not be the most beautiful person in the eyes of everybody online or whatever the case may be. My soul is beautiful and I can share that. And the people that resonate with that, the people that like who I am, or even the people that dislike me, we can connect. We can duke it out and I'm not alone. So, YOLO, you only live once is definitely one of those sayings I say randomly, but it holds so much truth. And not just because like you're running away or you're afraid of your mortality. YOLO, like FOMO, like that. You don't want that energy of like running away from something that's inherently true. One day you won't be here. But that's not a bad thing. And you can make being here the best as you can, and share that with other people. And if you can't, there are people like me, people like you that exist here. I think that's a beautiful thing about social media and about our generation, since that's a core part of it. I think we should embrace it. I think we should accept our place in human history. Be the example, all by simply being you as an individual with your own unique experiences that shape you, but also by recognizing we're all connected. And we're all similar, and even our differences are similar in a weird way. As far as like collectively, like as a species, I think that just like Miss Frizzle once said, we should, get messy, take chances, make mistakes. I think with our generation, it's very important. It was important for the generations prior to us, and of course it looked different, but it's still the same thing. And I think we owe it to ourselves, to the generations that shaped us and the generations that we shape, to be authentically us. And if our adolescent years look a little funky, I like funk music, so I'm just saying, I think you can just look at it from a different angle. Of course, you don't want to be like overly positive or anything. I get that toxic positivity is also a thing too. But I think it's important for balance. So, yeah. And if you happen to be a little awkward or embarrassed, be a Gen Zer. Bounce back. Just like how you posted on Wattpad 5 years ago, 10 years ago, however many years ago, and you feel embarrassed about that, and now you're here and you're watching this video, or you're creating another one, or whatever you're doing, and you feel as if you evolved, that's a good thing. Own that. And if you have to go back to the Wattpad stories or whatever it is you're embarrassed about, face it like a Gen Zer. Tweet about it. Post on Instagram. Listen to music. Be dramatic. Cry about it. And then delete the video after. I'm just saying. Like, there's a way for us to own it and also be aware of our mental health. I think that's a cool thing. And I think we're also teaching prior generations that, hey, feeling isn't necessarily a bad thing. Also, younger generations, don't be too attached to that phone. There's a whole life out here. Okay? People like me that actually exist behind this screen. And yeah. Yeah. Loneliness isn't something that we should shun. Because I guarantee that our generation is the way we are. Not just with loneliness, but just in general. Because we are a reflection of the generations prior to us. And the fact that we may be a little too intense, we may be lazy, which is really us just being so focused on rest, even if it might look different or it might have some side effects that are inherently unpleasant or unhealthy. We are the embodiment of experiences that generations that no longer exist probably didn't get to experience. And generations that do exist that our elders, if you will, not that they're that old or anything, but they come before us, they probably also didn't feel as if they could express certain things a certain way. Or just feel how they felt and express it with somebody without being burdened by it or being haunted by it by other people in their life. Societal pressures, stuff of that nature. I think it's important for Gen Z to utilize the fact that we have access to the generations prior to us through the internet and use it for our betterment, as I like to do, but also be an example